Welcome back. We are continuing with Going Native, written by Uncle Ceiling. Going Native, Chapter 10. The bed had served him well, but Stace figured this was probably the last season for it. As he stripped off the covers and revealed the frame, he tried to focus on the work. The frame had a series of pegs embedded in it around the perimeter, with a rope going across from peg to peg like a spider's web to provide the cushion and spring of a mattress. He could take the sag out of the frame by putting blocks under it, but from the way it was caving in and the lack of tension on the ropes, he figured it wasn't long for the world anyway. He would have to do a more substantial repair or take the time to replace it. Sleeping arrangements really needed to be addressed. He thought about Ella's comment about flirting and groaned inwardly. This was going to be like teaching high school again? Or being a student again? Either way, this was going to be awkward. While he thought, he started untying the rope and coiling it around his arm. Ella and Ian were chatting away with what sounded like an argument, but who was he to tell? Stace knew that he and Ian had been a bit more comfortable than you would expect with two completely different species sharing a home, and a few of his interactions with Ella had been a bit suspect, but he had been trying to push down any more sexual thoughts. They were aliens, and for all he knew they were oviparous. Then again, so were the Martians on Barsoom, and that seemed to work out well for John Carter. Ella, all but admitting that she had been flirting, put it to the forefront. They were going to have to deal with interspecies relationship issues. He wasn't even good with human issues. Daniel had pursued him, and the years before he got married was just a blur of one-night stands, a couple weeks of dating at the most. The longest he had been with someone before Daniel was a girl Stace had met in his freshman year of college. That was, 4 months? He couldn't even remember her name. Stace started laying out the rope on the floor in long lines, measuring it and trying to figure out exactly what he would need to make 3 beds. Could he even fit 3 beds? He could maybe do bunk beds. He checked his boxes, but Stace could only come up with a few more feet of matching rope. Everything else he had was either too thin or in terrible shape.
What's the problem? Did I kill the bed?
Ella looked a little sheepish.
The bed was on life support before you got here. You just were kind enough to put it out of its misery. I'm trying to figure out how to fit a bed for each of us. Even if I sacrifice all of my supplies, 3 beds are going to take up pretty much the entire room.
He let out a sigh.
Seriously, you two could have at least sent me a note. Stopping by unannounced is very rude.
Stace made sure to give Ella a grin to take the sting out of what he said.
I have to admit I feel bad making you two sleep on the floor. It's kind of embarrassing to put you two through that while I get the only bed.
You're hurt. I couldn't treat you with you on the floor.
True, but you're a human. It's hard to explain.
Ella frowned.
So much of this is common knowledge by now. If anybody I knew found out I let 2 males sleep on the floor while I took the only bed, I would never be able to live it down. They'd be busting my tits for the rest of my life.
Well, then I aim to ensure a long life of you getting your tits busted.
Stace smiled pleasantly.
Still doesn't fix our sleeping arrangement problem. Maybe Ian has some ideas.
Sure, I have an idea. Stop flirting with a human.
Don't be like that. How would you know if I was flirting, anyway? You can't even understand us.
True, but watching you push your tits out at him whenever he looks your way is a pretty obvious sign.
Ella's embarrassment was plain on her face.
If you keep jumping between fight and fuck any harder, you'll bust your staples again.
I didn't. I mean, I never wanted to give you the impression that I want to hurt him. I don't. I just want to make sure we're safe.
Ellora kept trying to backpedal, to make up for lost ground in her relationship with the lilac male who was constantly getting on her case.
That's the problem. You keep saying we need to be safe. We needs to include Stace. Human or not, he is the one keeping us alive. I'm not going to let you abandon him.
Ian crossed his arms as he matched GoldenEye to GoldenEye. With Ellora sitting down, he was just a few centimeters taller and could actually stare her down.
You're supposed to be a soldier. Think of us as your new pod.
It isn't that easy. I have been fighting humans for years. I like Stace. Goddess forbid, I'm attracted to him. He's got that whole girl in a guy's body thing going and he's exotic. He even smells nice considering he hasn't had a proper shower since I was a kid. Ellora let out a deep breath, collecting her thoughts before she continued. It's just that I've spent my entire career fighting humans. I have lost friends to assassinations and suicide attacks and sabotage. The whole reason we're down here is probably some human plot. I can't give that suspicion up overnight just because I met one that smells nice.
You're going to have to try, because we're all dead otherwise. Think you can manage it?
Ellora's face firmed and she looked as determined as Ian had ever seen her.
I will try.
Good.
Ian's mischievous grin filled his entire round face, eyes glittering.
Now, here's my idea.
Ellora had to admit, she was not expecting Ian's suggestion. Stace wasn't sure at first, but Ian pulled out his tablet. The little brat was a fair hand at math and it only took a few minutes of diagramming out the problem for the two males to agree.
Looks like we'll be bunking together.
Stace said. He was doing that rub his neck when he feels awkward thing again. Ellora was starting to recognize it.
I apologize for that, but after looking over what I could understand of Iang's diagrams, it's pretty much keep the status quo or make one bigger bed. We don't have enough rope to make multiple beds. That will at least help out the two of you.
Wait. This wasn't right.
What do you mean the two of us?
I don't mind taking the floor. I've had to sleep on worse, and I wouldn't want to impose. You're my guests.
Stace paced out from the corner of the bed, then gestured.
Besides, it's only going to come out to about here. It's going to be cozy for two, let alone three.
You're going to get hurt sleeping next to the fireplace. That or an ember is going to fly out and light you on fire.
At least that got a laugh out of him.
Well, we can readdress this in a couple weeks. I'll be on the floor until then regardless.
I don't see why.
You also didn't see what that chunk of metal did to you. You're going to be sleeping on your back for a while yet, and cute or not, your shoulders are wider than mine.
You think I'm cute?
Ellora couldn't help the small, predatory smile.
Shit, forget I said that. It just slipped out.
Stace's face was getting flushed.
Do I have to worry about anything else just slipping out?
Now he was red from his chin to his ears.
Of course not, excuse me.
Stace turned away and started disassembling the bed with the aid of a wooden mallet.
You're flirting with him again.
Ian's glare wasn't as hateful as Ellora expected.
Of course I am. You said fight or fuck, and if I'm going to trust him, that eliminates one of the options.
Ellora grinned.
Besides, I've been stuck on the galaxy's most perverted planet for 6 years. If I don't get a dick in me soon, I think I will literally die.
So my punishment for having you treat the human as a member of the team is watching you try and fail to get him to fuck you for 90 days.
The playful laugh Ian let out hurt, but Ellora did her best not to let it show.
This is going to be amazing.
Why would I fail? I will have you know he said I'm cute. I would have preferred sexy or tough, but I will take cute.
Let's just say I know a few things you don't.
It surprised everyone, Stace most of all, that he was able to get a new bed frame knocked together by the end of the day. It involved disassembling and permanently borrowing pegs from a lot of equipment he would be missing in the spring, but Stace was coming to terms with the fact that this was his last winter. No reason to keep any of this, and all of his carefully laid plans and a decade of build-up didn't really mean anything anymore. The lean-to he used as a storage shed behind the cabin was looking a lot more empty and sad than it had the day before. The new frame was made in part from the planter boxes he set out every spring. Additional wood came from the frames he used to tan leather. Everything was assembled using wooden pegs and a drill brace Stace had brought with him from civilization. It was ugly and certainly wasn't square, but it was as sturdy as he could make it, and Ella finally would be able to sleep without her feet hanging off the bed. Getting Ella transferred from the chair to the bed was obviously more painful than she wanted to let on. She was probably afraid that if she was in too much pain, Stace wouldn't get her back on the chair tomorrow.
All right, lean back. I want to take a look at your incision.
As she leaned back, she also wiggled her hips, scooting farther to the middle of the bed until Stace had to practically climb in with her to get a good view. It was probably more comfortable in the center of the bed anyway, so he wouldn't fault her for it. The wound was clean and seemed to be healing well. Even the area where it had torn back open was closing nicely.
Well, not a doctor, Stace. How do I look?
Lovely.
A little.
From
Ella, and he was all flustered again. Why was she teasing him like this?
I meant the wound looks lovely. It's healing up well. The staples will be ready to come out in a day or two, I think, as long as you don't do anything too strenuous.
A large purple hand started stroking Stace's back and he pulled away with a start, nearly falling as he lurched backwards. That was enough of that.
Get back in the bed.
Ella patted the space next to her.
I feel like that would be a colossally bad idea on my part.
Ella sighed.
Hand me the tablet and sit next to me. I promise not to flirt with you. I want to teach you our language.
It wasn't a bad idea, Stace had to admit. It just felt like a setup.
All right, but if you start getting handsy, I'm leaving.
Sad, but fair. Now show me how to pull up those goofy books you were talking about earlier.
While Stace found the section for Edgar Rice Burroughs, Ian pressed in close next to him, with Ella in the bed, Stace sitting on the edge, and Ian in the chair. The three ended their evening at the cabin pressed shoulder to shoulder, reading along to A Princess of Mars. Ian was not entirely happy with how the previous night had turned out. Stace had ended up sleeping on the floor and Ian had to share the new bed with Ella. While he wasn't pleased with the company, it was substantially more comfortable than some blankets and furs on top of rough wood boards. For her part, Ella had been far more of a gentlewoman than Ian had expected. She was strange, a rough and tumble soldier, and considering her non-stop flirting with the human over the last few hours, he had pretty much expected her to make a move in the middle of the night. Instead, she had folded a blanket and stuffed it between them, then did her level best to pretend he didn't exist. When Ian had woken up, he noticed that Ella was already awake. She reached over and gently grabbed his arm before he could say anything, then gave a small nod to the table. Stace was sitting there with a familiar-looking sheet of oiled leather spread out in front of him. He had that large pistol and the odd wood and steel rifle in front of him, along with the box of ammunition and some cleaning supplies. While the two watched in silence, he hummed a quiet song to himself and wiped each down with a rag. Stace picked up the pistol and flicked a switch with his thumb, causing the 5-hole cylinder to slide out. He carefully examined each, then ran a rag through the barrel before closing it up with a solid click. Stace then picked up the rifle. He pulled down on the loop that fit around the hand, and the top of the rifle slid back, opening up a chamber that Stace looked through. He used a tiny loop of rag on a thin metal rod to clean and oil the barrel, then closed the rifle back up. He pulled back on the hammer with his thumb, then pulled the trigger and dropped it gently with a nod. One by one, Stace started sorting through those gleaming brass cartridges Ian had noticed earlier. He was inspecting each one, particularly looking at the small inset disc on the back of each. After he was done, he would put them in one of two piles. Stace seemed a bit upset at the second pile, but at least it was the smaller of the two. Stace picked up the handgun again and deftly swung the cylinder to the side. He slid one of the brass cartridges into each of the 5 slots, then closed it up and slid it into a leather holster on his belt. He then took 7 more cartridges and slid them one by one into a spring-loaded hatch on the side of the rifle. There were only 7 or 8 cartridges left in that pile, and 5 in the other. As Stace started packing everything up, he spoke.
You know, you two could have said something. Having you watch while you pretend to be asleep is a little creepy.
The startled reaction from the two of them was amusing if nothing else. They both seemed worried about the human with the primitive guns, but Stace could do something about that. Even if it meant making them worried about something else. Stace went to the duffel bag and dug through it before pulling out the oversized alien pistol. The cabin seemed to fill with a pregnant silence as he walked back towards the bed. Eleanor looked a little afraid, but determined. Her body was tensed, ready to fight. Ian was leaning away, scared. Neither of them seemed to expect what came next. Stace flipped the pistol in his hand, then offered it to Eleanor. She snatched it quickly, as if she was afraid he was going to pull it away as she reached for it.
I'm going hunting today. If it goes well, I'll be back today or tomorrow. If it goes badly, I might not be coming back at all. There are dangerous things out there, and I don't have enough ammunition or time to be plinking at the small and safe game. Ian can take care of you until you're mobile again, but I am pretty sure he doesn't know how to use that hand cannon.
Eleanor nodded. Stace couldn't quite make out the expression on her face. She seemed conflicted. Those ink-dark eyes were staring at him intensely. He thought for a second she might be about to do something, but instead she settled on a simple
"Thank you."
With that settled, Stace grabbed his pack and left. The pistol seemed heavy in Eleanor's hand as the two Shilvati watched their human host disappear into the vestibule room. After a few moments, she could hear the outside door close.
It's odd, you know.
She looked down at the pistol. It was a backup weapon, small by her standards, and across the back strap she could see where Sakai's name was engraved. The whole pod had teased her when she purchased it. Why get a little 10-shot hold-out weapon when they were always either in a safe zone or armed to the teeth? Even if you did want to carry something, at least get a real girl's gun.
What is?
Ian had slipped out of the bed and was standing by the fireplace, trying not to look nervous. It was clear that the pistol made him uncomfortable.
This pistol has been in that bag the whole time. The same bag that had these clothes.
Eleanor tugged at the too tight chest of her shirt.
You knew that there was a weapon here. And you didn't tell me.
Ian looked her in the eyes. She could easily see the fear in him, but when he spoke his voice was calm.
Of course I didn't.
Eleanor nodded.
Because you don't trust me.
Ian gave a single nod of his head in reply. Eleanor ejected the power cell and tossed it onto the table. It bounced and skittered, coming to a stop outside of her reach. With her own apprehension visible on her face, Eleanor held up the pistol butt first towards Ian. End of chapter. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe, and do all the YouTube stuff, visit and support the author, and I'll see you next time. If you didn't enjoy, comment on what I can do better. And as usual, have a wonderful day. End of chapter. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe, and do all the YouTube stuff, visit and support the author, and I'll see you next time. If you didn't enjoy, comment on what I can do better. And as usual, have a wonderful day.